Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight. Over the last few weeks I've talked about Russian agriculture and how it's made Russia self-sufficient in food production. Now it's the fertilizer sector that is my focus today, and how the European Union is dependent on Russian fertilizers. Now, the European Union has increased its imports of Russian fertilizers to a maximum level since December 2023. In February, the volume of deliveries amounted to 167 million euros in monetary terms. Now, this exceeded the previous month's figure by 16% in physical terms and 21% in monetary terms. Now, what are the reasons for this growth, and why are Russian fertilizers, unlike oil and gas, not subject to sanctions? Well, since 2022, due to rising energy prices, companies in the EU countries have been gradually closing and or mothballing their production facilities, with the fertilizer sector particularly affected. Now, given the depletion of land resources in the agricultural sector, as in farming, producers, as in the farmers, use additives in huge amounts. Now, who is buying? Now, Poland was the largest buyer for the third consecutive month from February, with imports increasing by 38% to 44 million euros, the highest since December 2021. Now, Belgium also saw a significant increase in purchases, with imports rising almost fivefold to 24 million euros. Romania and Bulgaria also saw notable growth, with imports to Romania increasing by 2.4 times to 10.3 million euros and Bulgaria by 2 times to 5.3 million euros. Germany also increased its import of Russian fertilizers by a large amount. Its purchase reached 20 million euros by the end of the winter. Now, these amounts may not sound significant, but we're talking about fertilizer, just something you put on the soil. These are important for farmers and for food production. Now, there's also reports that the United States has increased its purchases of Russian fertilizers. In February, they bought 158.5 million, and that's the highest level since June 2023. Now, the US is particularly interested in Russian nitrogen and potassium fertilizer, which are supplied consistently throughout the year. In particular, combined mineral fertilizers are seriously in demand, and supplies in February amounted to just them to $550,000. So this is understandable, given that Russia is the world leader in fertilizer exports and occupies a sixth of the world market for potash and a tenth for nitrogen-based fertilizers. Now, even the trade war with the West cannot dislodge Russia from its position, because it's the largest supplier after China of this useful raw material. Anyway, now it's unsurprising that all the attempts by the EU and Western governments to limit the import of fertilizer from Russia have been unsuccessful. I mean, at one time, companies in the EU were reluctant to do business with the Russian producers like Uralchem, Ukrali, Fosagro, Akron, due to personal sanctions on their top managers, most of whom are billionaire oligarchs, by the way. But there were no instructions from Washington or Brussels in this regard, but even a temporary reduction in supplies led Russian exporters to find difficulties in doing business, like chartering ships and making and receiving payments. And the ports of the Baltic countries, through which a large amount, almost a third of Russian fertilizers were then transiting, more than 250,000 tons of fertilizer were seized. Now, some of those were actually destined for poor African countries and were actually a gift from Russia, so, they didn't get it and they know who to blame. Now, as a result, prices increased significantly, and that led to concerns about the potential for a global famine. The restrictions on Russian food and fertilizers were immediately lifted, And in July 2022, the United States officially stated that sanctions would not apply to Russian fertilizers. Now, Anatoly Tinkov, a director at the Center for Agribusiness and Food Security at the Russian Center RANEPA, explained that financial institutions were informed that the fees for servicing trade in agricultural goods, including fertilizers, can be paid by SWIFT and are not subject to sanctions or financial transaction restrictions. Yeah, a SWIFT, if you'll pardon the pun, exemption. Now, since then, Russia has been regularly supplying fertilizers, thereby confirming the thesis that economic interests are always above the political ones. Furthermore, at the end of the winter, SCO export supplies always increase. That's due to the approaching sowing campaign, which in the EU begins a month earlier than it does here in Russia. During the spring field work, it's necessary to apply the mineral fertilizers, and they're a key to the future harvest and its yield. Now, as I mentioned, the EU's own enterprises either stopped working or significantly reduced their capacity, and with deficits appearing in some areas like 75%. Now, it's clear that production has become very unprofitable due to the high energy intensity and the large quantities of gas that's used as a raw material for making fertilizers. So this high cost of energy has undermined the competitiveness of the European industry on the global market. So it's unprofitable, and they're now moving to where gas is cheaper, places like Asia, and others are just closing down altogether. Now, as we all know, electricity in the European Union also has a high price tag. So chemical plants that also provide feedstock to the production of mineral fertilizers are unable to do so due to the high cost of the energy. They can't increase their prices because that would result in farmers purchasing mineral fertilizer from outside the EU, and that's just the situation means they can't make any money. However, it's unlikely anyway, that the European Union officials who advocated the anti-Russian sanctions were actually expecting such a result. Now, prior to the situation that occurred in 2022, Russia was a significant supplier of mineral fertilizers to the European Union market. Once this happened, and it really kind of occurred to them, they decided they wanted to reduce this dependence. Now, one of the results of that was the Russian chemical and fertilizer companies expanded their exports to Asia and Latin America, while the European counterparts were unable to provide farmers with the volumes they needed. Now, over the past 2 years, Russian exporters have increased their sales by 70%. Yes, 70%. Now, the largest market for Russian fertilizers is now India, which has tripled its purchases of fertilizers. Turkey and Vietnam are now major and important buyers. Brazil's become a significant market, and the countries of the African Union are expanding their purchases due to favourable terms offered by Russia. Now, over the past 15 years, the agricultural sector has doubled its demand for fertilizers, and Russian companies are planning to invest the equivalent of more than $20 billion, obviously in rubles, over the next 5 years, which will double their turnover and no doubt make a huge increase in their profits. Now, domestic producers generate about 15% of the global turnover, and they're only second behind China in what they export. Now, this has a positive impact on Russian export revenue. Now, previously, used to bring in around 10 to 12 billion a year. However, by 2022, end of 2022, this had increased to 19.3 billion, and that obviously helps the Russian economy. Now, Tikhanov, he notes that the impact of sanctions on Russian exports was more than compensated by the instability of the commodity markets, where the price of their products soar when any risk factors or things like that appear. Now, it is anticipated that the demand for chemical products and fertilizer, both in Russia and globally, will continue to grow by 15 to 20% annually. Now, this growth obviously is not going to be evenly distributed. The European market in particular is in danger of being seriously left behind. While the share of Russian suppliers in that market has decreased, their importance remains, and they'll continue to replace the previously domestic suppliers in the EU. Now, any attempts to replace them with products from other countries such as Morocco, Israel, Kazakhstan and other countries have been unsuccessful so far due to the limited volumes that are available and the narrow range that they have, plus the fact that they don't always meet the environmental requirements of the European Union, unlike Russian agrochemicals, which do. Now, I expect that mineral exports to Russia will continue to increase in the coming months, and while the possibility of sanctions against them are unlikely, but should the EU decide to take such a step, it's going to be just like imposing another oil price ceiling. It will be very unsuccessful and backfire on them there. Now, European farmers could get mineral fertilizers from third-party countries, including Turkey, India, China and the Pacific Islands, but like the oil that they've been buying and petroleum products, they're going to be paying much higher prices. And it's crucial to realise that the fertilizer, like the oil market, is global, and there's very little excess capacity, and there's no explored deposits that can be immediately used. The commission of new production facilities can take up to 10 years, depending on the type of product that you're looking at. Consequently, it's not feasible to do without Russia and its fertilizer in this regard. So it's possible that they're now going to have to compete on the world market for Russian fertilizers. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and do visit the website SCO BRICS Insight for articles that this video is based on. If you don't see a video from me for a couple of days, there are reasons for that. So do visit the channel website, and you'll be able to see for yourself. Anyway, thank you, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to talking to you again.